Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to discuss about the module 2 of our Introduction to Networks course. This module 2 is called Basic Switch and End Device Configuration. So let's start. Guys, from my point of view, this module is pretty important because this is the module where you get to understand and first experience what Cisco Ios is, what is its command structure, how do you interact with the iOS, what are the basic configuration steps for configuring devices such as switches and routers, and also how do you configure the IP addresses. So let's go and dig deep into this particular module. As usual, these are the different objectives that for this particular module. The first one is to learn about Cisco Ios. How do you access Cisco Ios? How do you navigate between the Cisco Ios? What is its command structure? What are the different basic steps for device configuration? How do you save these configurations? What do you mean by the different addresses, IP address? How do you assign these IP addresses? How do you configure these addresses? And finally, how do you verify the connectivity between these devices? So this module actually gives you the introduction to packet tracer. What are the, how do you, the environment, how do you actually set up a particular switch? So in order to make it easy for the students to understand, what I'm going to do is I'll be covering the theoretical concepts in this particular video, whereas I will be making another video with hands-on demo on packet tracer. So each and every one of these steps that we discuss as part of this video will be covered and will be shown as a demo in the next upcoming packet tracer video. So to enhance your learning, to understand more about these things, do continue to watch that video also, so that it will give you a better understanding of these concepts. So first, let's start from Cisco Ios Access. What do you mean by iOS? First and foremost, any end device or host system must have an operating system to work. So in this case, Cisco Ios is the operating system that you find in almost all the Cisco devices such as switches and routers, irrespective of their size and their activity. Now, if you check out the diagram here, you see there are three components that we have written. The first one is the hardware central part, and followed by kernel, and the upper part is shell. To understand more, hardware are the actual physical components of your particular system, which are the electronic components. The kernel is the portion of the operating system that actually interacts with this hardware and software, and it actually plays a very key role in allotment of these hardware resources. Shell is a portion which actually interacts with the user. The user can get to use the hardware through the shell only. There are two ways for the users to access this particular shell. One of them is the CLI approach, and the other one is the GUI approach. CLI stands for command line interface. GUI stands for graphical user interface. Now, if you check out, as I said, the hardware is the actual components or physical components. Kernel is the one which actually communicates with the hardware, and shell provides the interface for the user to do their work. Now, talking about CLI and GUI, the best example for a graphical user interface is the Windows operating system. If you see, when you open a Windows PC, all you see is graphics with icons representing different actions. So it becomes much more easier for the user to work with these things. You can use it, simply drag drop the system, copy paste. You can do all those kind of stuff. It is much more easier. Even your most common one is the Android operating system. But though it's very easy and it's more attractive, the GUI always has got more tendency to fail or crash, and it does not give the proper control to the network administrator. That is the reason most of the network administrators tend to use CLI approach. CLI stands for command line interface, where the users interact with the operating system or interact with the kernel through a set of commands, text-based commands. So anything you want to do, it has to be command-based. So when you talk about a CLI approach, usually the users might not feel that much comfortable using it. But CLI approach is much more resource intensive, and it is very stable when you compare with a GUI. It gives you a much higher degree of control for the administrator with the resources. So that is the reason the Cisco Ios is CLI based, and whatever functionality we are going to implement as part of this particular module will be CA approach only. Now, how do you access a particular device? This chapter is going to cover how do you access. Usually there are only two ways. One of them is physical access port and the other one is remote access. If you buy a switch and if I want to do something on that switch, how do you do it? The first one and the most easiest one is through your console port. Each and every Cisco switch or router will have a physical management port called as a console port. As shown in the figure, there is a blue colored cable over there. Usually, even in our packet tracer, the Cisco cable is blue colored. This particular cable will allow you to connect your PC to the switch through a serial port and access it. The other two connectivities or the other two ways of connecting or accessing your iOS is a remote connection. Of the remote connection, we have two ways. One of them is a secure shell SSH and the other one is a telnet connection. Both of them will allow you to connect to a switch remotely across the network. But you always have to make a habit of using secure shell, simply because secure shell connectivity is far more secure than telnet. Secure shell does encrypt each and every input that you are typing to your switch, whereas telnet will not. So when you use telnet, whatever commands or whatever passwords you are typing to the switch will be sent as plain text. Anybody who tries to attack, it is much more easier to do it through a telnet connection. That is the reason all the network administrators tend to use only SSH connections for accessing and configuring the switches. These are the different terminal emulation programs, and the most common program you usually use is PuTTY. And there are other examples of terminal emulation programs are Teraterm and Secure CRT. These terminal emulation programs will allow you, once you connect the console port to the RS-232 port of your system or the serial port of your system, these, once you open the particular PuTTY configuration, it allows you to connect them directly to the switch or even remote connections to the switch also. So these are the terminal emulation programs that we usually use, and I personally use PuTTY a lot. So how do you navigate through this iOS? So what are the different steps that you have? This is the point where we actually start working with configuring of your Cisco devices. Now in this particular module, we will extensively cover Cisco switch. The router, we will be covering it in module 6. Almost the same commands are used for both switch and router, whereas the router we will try to add a bit more about interfaces also. Now coming to here, to make it much more easier and to make it more secure for accessing the particular iOS, what we do is we divided this particular access into a hierarchy. And please remember these things. The first mode, or whenever you attach to a switch, the first thing you see is an user executive mode. User executive mode, which is actually denoted by a greater than symbol shown here. If you see, there is a switch written down here. Let me show you a quick thing. And if you see here, this is the particular symbol which actually shows you which mode you are in. If you see this particular prompt, which has the default name for the device. If you're talking about a switch, you see a switch there. If you talk about a router, you see a router there. And if there is a greater than symbol after this, then this comes as user executive mode. This is the first mode that will allow you to access the particular switch, and it doesn't support many commands. It is just a basic monitoring mode, and that is the reason it is also called as a view only mode. Now, once from this mode, if you want to go inside, dig deeper, then you go to the next mode, something called as a privileged executive mode. This mode is actually identified by a hash symbol after the prompts. So if you see, once again, the same names are written. If it is a switch, you see it as a switch. But here the difference is, rather than the greater than symbol, you will have a hash symbol. So this mode is called as a privileged executive mode. This mode does support many features like show commands, which we will be studying later in our study. Now, how do you navigate between these modes? What are the things that you need to do here? So here we talk about the Cisco configuration and iOS navigation. So let's start navigating into these modes. But do remember, the first mode is the user executive mode. The second mode is the privileged executive mode. And from there onwards, the most important mode is the global configuration mode. So to know more about these modes and what they do, as I said, we have to do a demo in order to understand how each one works. So let's start here. If you see, as I said, after getting into the privileged executive mode, you will still don't have the full access configurations. In order to write your own code, in order to let the switch do whatever you want it to do, you have to enter into the global configuration mode. So at the first user executive mode, you have to type in enable, E-N-A-B-L-E. I'll show them. E-N-A-B-L-E. Once you type in enable, it will let you go into the privileged executive mode. At that point, you have to type in configure terminal. C-O-N-F-I-G-U-R-E, configure terminal. Once you type in the configure terminal, it will take you to this global configuration mode. This global configuration mode is identified by the name. Here, if you see the name of the particular device, and there is a bracket called as config, which will allow you to understand that you are in the global configuration mode, followed by a hash. So once you enter into this mode, now you can actually enter as many commands as you want. You can do many number of things. Now, to make it much more easier for us to understand, this mode actually contains many sub modes. What are these sub modes is, if you want to do, if you want to write a description for any interface, you go to the interface mode. Or if you want to secure a particular configuration, or if you want to secure a particular line mode, you go into the line sub mode. So if you see, these are the examples are given. There are many sub configuration modes which we will be studying across CCNA1, CCNA2. But the most commonly that we use regularly are the line configuration mode, which is shown here, and the other one is the interface configuration mode. If you check out, the line configuration mode is shown here the same. Once again, the name of the device is written. There is a brackets written over here. The hash symbol is there. But in fact of config, you find config-line, which tells you that it is in the line sub configuration mode. And for this is the interface, IF, interface configuration mode. So when these things will help you identify whenever you're working with iOS, by checking these prompts, you should be able to identify which mode it is in, and which command should be typed in what kind of mode. Because there will be questions that will be asked during your module exams on these modes and the capability and the different types of commands that we use in these modes. So how do you move between these modes? Frankly speaking, there are only two commands to navigate between these modes. One of them is the end, and one of them is the exit. I usually tend to use exit mode. So whatever mode you are in, if you want to go back, you simply type in the exit command. If you check it out here, I didn't get an example here. And if you are in the interface mode, that means config if mode, and if you want to go back, simply type in exit exit and press enter. You will be taken back to your global configuration mode. No sir, I don't want to go into that. I want to come back to the privileged mode. Then in that case, simply type in end, end, or simply press Ctrl Z, which is a hotkey. I'll show you some of these hotkeys and the shortcuts that we use. Now, if you check this out as shown here, irrespective, you need not manually enter all these end and exit in each and every time. So whenever you have, or whenever you want to type in the new commands, or whenever you want to change your sub configuration mode, simply type in the command and the iOS will change automatically for you. You need not do anything else. And in this particular example, if you see, what I'm trying to do here is, you are sitting in the line configuration mode, switch line configuration, and here I actually gave the command saying that go to this interface, fast Ethernet 0x1, and automatically this has changed into the interface sub configuration mode. This is pretty much easy and far more easy to work with for the students also. Please remember the two terms, exit and end. Exit is used to move between these modes, whereas end is used to move from any mode directly to the privileged mode. If you check out here in this particular example, when I press end here, you automatically came back to the privileged executive mode. Okay, so let's go to the next part. Now, in order to understand more about the commands and to work with these commands, first we should be able to observe what the command structure is. It's pretty simple actually. If you check out this diagram, we have given two examples of understanding what the command structure is. Now, this is once again the prompt as I explained to you earlier. This is the user mode where you see the name and the appropriate symbol. And this is the command. There are two commands written over here. This is the first command which shows you the show command, and the second command is the ping command. Okay. So of these two, in order to explain it, check this out. The prompt is the same. This show and the ping in both these commands are the actual command. whereas the space is between them. Usually whenever you type in a parameter, that should, your command name should be followed by a space, and then whatever parameters you want to pass it on to the command, you write it down here. Now I can't say just say ping and press enter there. I have to say something. If I want to call somebody, I have to call them by name or something. In the same way, I can't simply say ping and press enter. I have to confirm, I have to give it a particular parameter, maybe a system name or an IP address, so that it can go and check and verify the connectivity. In the same way, the ping and show, I simply cannot say show. I have to specify what I want the iOS to display for me. So that is the reason. And if these things, the keyword or the argument will actually tell the Cisco iOS what I wanted to do. So, and to understand more, to elaborate, because what we see, those two, the show command and the ping commands, are very small commands, and you have many complex commands in Cisco. Rather than me explaining this table, let me take this example. There is a one big example down here, if you can check it out, which is the switch port security command, which you will be covering in CCNA2. To understand this command, or whenever you study in the NetAcad platform, you see the things which are written in bold are the actual commands itself. Whatever is written in bold are the actual commands. Okay, and whatever is written within these curly braces, if you can see, there are curly braces here. Whatever it is written in the curly braces, that means these are the keywords or arguments that are mandatory, that should be passed to the switch port security, this particular command. So if I type in switch port security aging, I have to specify whether it is a static aging, or else I can actually specify the time. If you see here, this time is in bold, which is the command. This is slightly italic in nature, which is nothing but the argument. Then I can type here maybe hours or minutes, 160 or 180 or 200, which is in minutes. I can type it here. And the next one, or else, this particular will tell you or. So there are three options for me for this particular command. I can either go with static, or I can specify time, or I can also tell what type of aging it is. When I can type in type, and for type I have to specify whether it is absolute or inactivity. So I have to type all these things. So in this way, there are many complex commands in Cisco, but usually in CCNA1 we won't be working with these complex commands. We will be working straight with very simple commands like the ping IP address or assigning of the IP addresses, like those things only. So need not worry much about them here. But understand, when you see these commands, please try to break it into smaller pieces and then understand it. And if you take this thing, if you take this particular example for the ping one, the ping is your command itself, and whatever is written down here in the italicized one is the command, is the keyword or the argument that you pass to this particular command. And also, if I want to trace route something, then trace route is the command pad, whereas the IP address that I want to find out will be the keyword or the argument for this particular command. Check this out. So I have to type in ping 10.10.10.5. Ping is my actual command, followed by a space, and whatever I type in, the IP address that I type in here is your argument. So when I type in this command, your Cisco iOS will go and find out whether there is any device which is active at this IP address. And if there is any IP address active, or if there is any device that is active with this IP address, it will come back to me saying that ping successful, and it will give me all the kinds of details. I'll show it to you in the next video. And similarly, if you are going to try about this command, once again, this is the command, this is the space, and this particular IP address is going to find out the path that is taken to reach this IP address. The trace route command will give you that particular output. So this is the command structure. Please remember this command structure, because we will be working extensively with the different commands that we use starting from the next module onwards. And now if you go on, in order to make life easier and but this CLI much more user attractive, they have added two types of two help features are actually included in this particular iOS. The first help feature is called as context sensitive help, and the second help feature is called as command syntax check. So if you check it out here, the very first one, what it is, I don't know how many of you know this or not. Some of you must have heard about the manual command in Linux, man. Similarly, if I type in, check this out, this is the, once again, this is the device, this is the mode that it is in, and if I type in ping and then a question mark here, this is called as context sensitive help. When I type in a question mark, it is going to give me all the different options that come under this ping. So what are the different options here? I can type in word destination address, which is nothing but the host name, maybe ping lab a router, something like that, and an IPv4 address or an IPv6 address. And this is the kind of context sensitive help. So if you don't understand anything, or if you have forgot what type of parameters that you can pass to this command, simply type in an question mark. Automatically it will display a list of all the different parameters, and what type of parameters it is expecting also it will give you. Once again, this I will cover it in the demo part. And the second type of help is called as a command syntax check. So whenever you type something wrong, whenever you type, even whenever you don't give a proper spelling, if I typed in interface spelling wrong, it will automatically show you where the mistake is. If you can see, whenever I press enter, it will automatically say that invalid input detected and so and so marker. It is going to tell me that some problem has happened. Please make sure you rectify it. So here, when I give you fast Ethernet 0x1, I should not give a space here. So automatically it is saying there is some mistake with this particular command. Check it out. Because of these two help features, most of it we can actually troubleshoot at the earlier stages itself. Whenever you are typing, because we are all humans and we make mistakes, when we make any spelling mistake or maybe like adding an additional space, it will automatically tell me, please check it once again, which is far more easier for us. Now, if you go on, these are some of the hotkeys and shortcuts which I absolutely love about CLI. Here, there are some commands which are a bit lengthy commands. So rather than the user need to type each and everything, the best possible way is to use a tab. So if I just type in maybe one or two or three characters that belong to that command and press tab, it automatically fills it for me. You simply need to enter the partial commands only. And also Cisco's CLI is very much well known for its usage of shortcuts. I told you earlier that from moving to user from user executive mode to privileged executive mode, you need to enter enable, enable. So most of the time I just don't press enable, I just press en and enter. That's sufficient. En automatically collaborates to enable. And also rather than typing in configure terminal, I can simply write in conft. This is equal to configure terminal. In this way, if of course, for the first time, I always recommend all the people to first use with the full commands rather than going for the shortcuts. Because once you start using the full commands and once you get good good experience working with these commands, then you can go for the shortcuts. Okay. So as I said, the best thing for me is the tab character, which actually autofills most of my commands. And also I'll show you how this tab character works when I do the demo in the packet tracer. The backspace, the left arrow, right arrow, up arrow, all these things most of you people have been working. It's the same thing. It moves your cursor to the left or to the right. And the up arrow, which will actually show you what are all the previous commands that you typed in. So if you want to repeat the same command, you simply press the up arrow and then enter. That's all. You did not type the whole command again and again and again. These are some of the best features of this particular iOS through CLI. Okay. And these are some of the other keys that we still use. One of them is the enter key space bar. I'll tell you how this enter key and space bar are used when you type in the more prompt. I told you about the context sensitive help, right? So when you press in a question mark, sometimes the output might exceed your display window. That means you might get 200 or 300 lines of output. All of them cannot be shown. So when there is more output to be shown, you always see something called as, if you see here, more is written down, right? So you see a more here. So whenever you see a more, that means there is some more output that is to be displayed. In order to check that output, if you press enter, it will only next show you the next line of the output. And if you press the space bar, it will take you to the next screen. And if you press any other key, it will completely remove that and you will get back to the original privileged executive mode, which is actually denoted by the device name and a hash. Remember these things when you type in the question mark, and sometimes when you want to see what all the commands you type, it will not be shown in one particular page. To scroll down, you will see a small notification saying there is more left by, you see this hyphen more hyphen. When you see this, you should understand that there is some more data that is to be seen. And in that case, you simply press the enter key, which will show you the next line. Or if you press the space bar key, it will show you the entire next screen. And any other key will come out of that particular window. And also this is, which is very helpful for me, something called as Control Shift 6. Most of the times, as I said, we human beings make mistakes. So sometimes irrespective of which mode we are in. Maybe when we are in a hurry, we type in the commands, and when we type in the command in the user mode, it will start a DNS lookup, and it will take absolutely up to 1 to 2 minutes for it to come back. In order to save the time, rather than sitting idle, I can press Control Shift 6, which will actually abort that particular DNS lookup and will return back to the user mode. I will also show these particular examples in the packet tracer video. We can check it out there. These are very useful tips and useful tools when you are working with this particular CLI. Please remember that packet tracer CLI is very easy to use, and all these content text features are pretty easy once you understand what you're doing. That's all. Okay. This is the part which is very, very important, and whatever we have discussed until now is only the introduction part of your iOS, what iOS is, or what is the command structure, or how to navigate between the iOS, or what are the different shortcuts that we use for iOS, all those kind of things. This point onwards, we are going to start the basic device configuration. But before I start, let me give you a small explanation about why do we need it, why we should study this. See, if you buy a router or if you buy a switch for yourself, the first thing you want to do is you want to secure that particular switch. You want to make sure that the switch actually works according to your own requirements. If you're having a network maybe with let me say 10 systems, and you want to set up those 10 systems to the switch, and you want to make sure that you divide these 10 systems into different VLANs, or you want to assign different speeds to each one of these systems, you can absolutely do anything you want. So for all these things, for your switch to work according to your need and requirement, you have to configure it. You have to enter your commands. For that to happen, I told you there are only two ways of accessing these switches, accessing the Cisco switches. The first way is through the console port. The console port is the physical management port. The other way is through the remote access part. The remote access part, we will be doing it only through SSH and Telnet. So once you buy the switch, once you access it, once you type all the commands in, it is your duty is to make sure to secure it also. Secure it means I don't want once I do it and I put it on the table, start working and I go out, somebody comes in and access the same switch and dump all his particular code into it. I don't want that to happen. If it is my switch, I am the only person who should be accessing it, and the switch should only take commands from me. For that reason, you have to secure all these modes, whatever modes I have told you, and whatever access ways that we have, all of them should be secured through passwords, so that no unauthorized person, nobody else who knows the password, should be able to enter into the switch. This is what the basic device configuration is all about. And also we do provide legal notifications through banner messages. I'll explain all these things. They are very, very simple. And also for remote access, you have to set up the switch through their SVI. SVI stands for Switch Virtual Interface. For me to sit in my home and to access a switch at my college, I need to have an IP address for the switch. Without an IP address, I won't be able to identify it on the network. But a switch is a layer 2 device. So how do we give it? We give it through something called as an SVI. I will explain it when the appropriate slide comes. So now this basic device configuration is all about setting up your device, whether it might be a switch or a router, and securing the access to the device. There are only two things: setting up and securing. So let's start discussing about these steps each in detail. The first and foremost thing that we do is setting up of a device name. So you buy the switch. By default, all the Cisco switches and routers come with its default name called as a switch or a router. If you see here, whenever you connect, you only see the switch. But I might have maybe 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 switches in my particular department. Now, in order to identify each switch, I should be giving it a unique name. So for that reason, the first thing or the first step of any basic configuration is naming of the device. You have to specify a name for it. The command is very easy. You automatically put in CPC. Now you enter into the user mode. After the user mode, you type in enable. There you come to this particular privileged mode. Guys, I usually tend to say user mode and privileged mode. It's the same. User executive mode or privileged executive mode. It's the same. For me to kill time, and I got used to those terminology. So please get used to that also. Okay. So if you check it out, now once you type in the configure terminal, you come into the global configuration mode. And as I said, whatever you want to type or whichever command you want to type or whatever configuration you want to enter into the switch, it can only be entered in this particular mode only. Only in the global configuration mode you can do these things. So please remember that. Okay. So once you enter into the global configuration mode, you type in host name and whatever name you want to give, you can give it here. there are some certain rules and regulations for giving these names. So if it says switch floor 1, you can write switch CSE department lab 1, switch CSE department lab 2, or switch ECE department, switch IT department. You can write anything, doesn't matter, as long as these guidelines are met. If you say, what are the guidelines? The first guideline is it should always start with a letter. No numbers are allowed for starting points. It should always start with a letter, and it should not contain any spaces. Check it out here. The example is given here. It should not contain any spaces. It should always end with a letter or a digit. It should always end with a letter or a digit. Only letters, digits, and these dashes are allowed. No colons, no spaces, nothing else. No hash symbols, nothing is allowed. Only letters, digits, and dashes. And finally, the name, the length of this particular name that you are assigning to your device should always be less than 64 characters in length. Only 64 characters are allowed. Most commonly that I find with students is sometimes in a hurry to finish this step quickly, they might do a mistake. So when I type in rather than floor 1, they might press floor 10. Whatever name you type and you press enter, it will automatically take it here. See, the switch is changed to the name that you typed in. Sir, what if I do a mistake? The most common question that I see whenever I start my lab is, sir, I mistakenly entered a wrong host name. What do I do? Guys, please remember this. There is always a keyword called as no. So if you assign a wrong host name, or even you assign a wrong IP address, or if you want to delete the previous command, simply type in here no host name. Then automatically it revert back to the switch. So if you want to remove a host name, you can't simply Control Z or undo. There is nothing of that sort in CLI. It doesn't happen. For that also you need a command. And if you want to change the host name that you assign, you have to type in no space host name. That's all. Then automatically what it will do is it will come back to the switch menu, and you then from that point onwards you can do the same command again and now type properly without any errors. Please remember this. If you want to remove anything, if you want to undo anything, there is no undo button here. You have to use the command called as no. When even for the IP address settings also, which we will be covering in the module 8 and module 9, this no command will come into play, because most of the students, when they're typing, maybe because of hurry or because of nervousness, they do type in mistakes. And once you type mistake in the IP addresses, it is very difficult to troubleshoot. So please make sure while you are typing for the first time, take a little bit of time, cool down, and type the numbers carefully. That's all. Okay. So the first step in your configuration is assigning a device name. Or if you want to note down, these are the steps that usually come in the exam. You will be asked like enter the basic steps or do the basic configuration of a switch. The first thing is assigning a host name. The next one is how do you secure the access to the switch. Now for these secures, the first thing you should understand is how do you set up your password. Now most of you must have got your bank accounts or online banking. You set up different pins and you set up different passwords. If you check out the different criteria, whenever you are setting up a password, even for Cisco NetAcad, they ask you for one capital letter, one special character, one letter, one digit, right? The reason why they ask is if you keep jumbling with these higher case, lower case, alphabet, special characters, it becomes very difficult for a hacker to break into your system. If you can mix and match a long password, that it actually gives you better strength. So these are some of the guidelines. As I said, sir, why should I bother about these password guidelines? It's simply because once you set up your switch, you have to make sure that nobody else will be having access to the switch unless until you are the authorized person. Understand? So for that reason, what I'm going to do is I am going to provide particular passwords to each and every mode of access, so that other than me who knows the passwords, if anybody tries to access it, they will be blocked. Now for setting up these passwords also, please see there are some guidelines which are not mandatory actually, but these are called as best practices. We always want that are more than 8 characters in length, and as I said, it should be a mix and match of uppercase, lowercase numbers, letters, special characters, and numeric sequences. And also, I don't want each and everybody to setting up the same password for everything. Most of us have the same password for all our email accounts for everything, but it is not at all a safe thing to do. And also do not use the common passwords, common words like welcome, thank you, those kind of things, because these are the ones which the hacker will try to access the same time. Now for our how do I call it? There are something called as packet tracer activities, PT activities, which are actually designed for the students to get used with all these particular things. In these PT activities, for ease of usage, what Cisco does is they will set up the passwords as Cisco or class. These are the two most common passwords that I actually see. Please don't think that these are very secure and they are only for teaching purposes only. Now, when you are setting up any passwords, please make sure that you follow these guidelines. Once you follow these guidelines, automatically your password will be set, which has got a good strength to it. Okay, so please do keep these things in mind. Now, as I said, the first step is assigning a host name. The second step starts by securing each and every access to the switch. Let's start what it is. Check this out. As I told, there are three modes, right? The first mode is the user executive mode. The second mode is privileged executive mode. Now, how do you provide secure access? Simply check this, but I'm going to talk with the example over here. If you check it out, I typed in configure terminal, and these are the three commands that will allow you to secure your user executive mode. And if you check here, the commands are line console 0. The idea behind this line console 0 means whenever you plug in your console port, I told you that each and every switch or a router will have a management port where you can plug your console cable into. I'll show you that in the packet tracer also. When you are plugged into that particular port, anybody can buy a console cable, anybody will have a laptop. So if they buy a console cable, plug one end of the console cable into the switch and plug the another one into their system, they should not get the access to, right? So if anybody tries to do that, you are setting up a password. So line console 0. 0 stands for the port number. Because there is only one console port, we start with 0. So line console 0. And you set up a password. Password here I have written as Cisco, but I said give a very good password so that it makes very difficult for a hacker to enter into it. So, but for ease of usage, that I'm saying here, password is Cisco, and unless until you type in as login here, this password will not be accepted. You press login, that's it. Once you do these three steps, whenever a person wants to enter into the switch, unless until they know this password that you have set as Cisco, they won't be able to enter into the switch. This is the first step. These three commands: line console 0, password Cisco, login. These three commands should be entered to secure your user executive mode. So, okay, sir, fine, I did it. What's next? Now, in order to secure your privileged executive mode, if you want to do this, then there is only one particular command. You type in enable secret, and whatever password you want to type here, you type here. It might be class, it might be thank you, it might be welcome, you do whatever. This is the password. This is your argument part. The actual command is enable secret. Once you type this, whenever the user gets into the user mode, if he tries to get into the privileged mode, once again, it is also closed. Unless until he knows the password that has been set here, he won't be able to do anything with your privileged mode. Now, as I said before, these are the two ways of securing your switch through physical access. What about remote access? I told you that your switch can be accessed remotely also. So when you want to do with a remote access, how do you do it? Now, usually for any switch, there are 16 virtual lines through which you can connect to the switch. That is the reason what we say here is line VTY stands for virtual terminal 0 to 15. So 0 to 15 means for all the 16 different virtual connections, I am typing in password as Cisco. Once again, the same thing. Just like how you did here console 0, I am typing in VTY 0 to 15. The reason why I am typing VTY 0 to 15 is VTY stands for virtual lines. 0 to 15 stands for the 16 different virtual lines that your switch is capable of. So anybody who is trying to connect your switch remotely through any of these 16 virtual lines will have to know the password of Cisco. Sir, do I need to set up the same password for all the lines? No, you need not. You can set up differently. Say if I say, sir, the first for the first 4 virtual lines, I want to type it as class 1. And the first remaining 4, I want to type class 2. For the last 4, I want to type in class 3. You can do it. You can simply change the number here. Line VTY 0 to 4, password class 1, login. Line VTY 5 to 10, password class 1, enter login. Guys, please remember this. Unless until you type in this particular command, login command, you will not be able to authenticate this password. Only when you type in login, that means that if anybody is trying to log in through your virtual terminals or through your console ports, it will demand for this particular password. So it is a set of 3 commands. First you specify what you are safeguarding, whether it is a console port or the remote ports or the remote connections, and then you specify what the password is. The password command is pretty easy. Simply type in password, that's all. And the third one, most important one, is you have to set up the login part. So this is how you actually safeguard your switch from physical connection, through physical connectivity or even through your remote connectivities. Also remember that for your privilege executive mode, there is only one command that you can type in, which is simple enable secret class. The secret, this class is nothing but the password. Once again, here you can type any password here. So if any person, if you want to give access to the user mode but not the privilege mode, don't give this password. They will not be able to enter into the privilege mode. All these things I will show in your demo. We will take different passwords for each and every step, and I'll show you how without the password any person will not be able to access your different modes. So let's go on to the next one. The next part is encrypting of the passwords. Now I have shown you setting up of the different passwords for different types of your modes, with you starting with your user mode, remote connections and privileged mode. But in Cisco iOS, these whatever you type in, we call it as running configuration. I'll explain it in the next slide. So somebody wants to see, if they want to see the running configuration, if they type in the command called as show running configuration here, you see, if they type in the show running configuration, your Cisco iOS will show all the commands that you have typed, including your passwords in plain text. So whatever I typed in like class or Cisco, I can see them. Not only me, but somebody else can also see. So in order to make sure that nobody else is going to see whatever you have typed in there, we enter the command called as service password encryption. If you type in this command in the global configuration mode, what it does is it will automatically encrypt each and everything. If you see, once you type in this particular command and do the same switch show running configuration again, see how the password changes now. The same thing. Actually, we kept the password as Cisco. For an attacker, he won't be able to see that it is a Cisco here. He will see some kind of encrypted message, some kind of ciphertext, which he will not be able to decrypt. Similarly, we kept the password as class here. But once I do the service password encryption, that particular command, check out how the password is changed. So it will not allow any other user even to see what kind of passwords that you have set up. This is also one of the mandatory steps in your basic device configuration, which is called as service password encryption, which is used to encrypt all the passwords that you are setting up in your running config. I'll explain about what do you mean by running config, what do you mean by startup config in the next slides. So the next thing is something called, I was talking about legal notifications. This is called as a banner message. Now, why this? You see, usually when you go to restaurants or even anywhere you go, if the particular access is restricted, just put a small placard on the top of your doors saying that authorized person only, do not enter, beware of dogs. Those kind of messages are actually shown on boards, right? So rather, I don't have the capability of placing a board here. But if I want to warn the people who are trying to access my particular device that it is not good for you, then I can do that. I can place a legal notification, something through a banner message. Check it out here. Once again, I go into the configure terminal. As I said, guys, all of these commands, most of these commands, other than the show commands, you have to type them only in the global configuration mode. Please remember these things because we should not forget. The first one is your your user mode. The next one is the privilege executive mode, and where you type in configure terminal, here you type in enable, here you type in enable, okay. And in this one you have to, then once you type in configure terminal, or the simplest way, as I said, conf t, conf space t, you go into the global configuration mode. In this global configuration mode, if you want to place any message for the person who is trying to access your device like this, you have to type it here. Banner MOTD stands for message of the day. You can change it anytime you want to. I'll say message of the day, and these hash symbols are actually working as delimiters. Whatever content or whatever message that you place between these two will be displayed here. Once again, this I'll show it in the demo part. So I want to say, let me put it in say here saying that don't enter, cannot enter, execute, trespassers will be prosecuted. Any kind of message you can place it here. So whenever any person who tries to access this particular device, this message will be displayed on the first screen. This is called as the banner messages. Also, this is one of the mandatory for your basic device configurations. We call them as banner messages. The command here is banner MOTD. This is all the entire command, banner message of the day, and whichever data you want to enter, whichever message you want to show, you put it in these hash messages. Okay. So this is one other step in your basic device configuration. Now you have typed in all these messages, and how do you save these things? Usually I tell the analogy of a Word document. Now when you open a Word document, when you type something in it, it won't be saved automatically, right? You have to click the save button, so that even though you close the Word document, shut down your computer, come tomorrow, open the same document again, only if you save it, you can have the same content. If you don't click on save, whatever content you are typing will not be saved in your Word document, right? Similarly, in Cisco, whatever commands that you are typing now, they are called as running configuration. Running configuration are the commands that whatever you are typing now and which will have an immediate effect on the router or the switch. So once you are typing set password, login, service password encryption, all these things, they will automatically be reflected on the system as long as the system is active. That means once you remove the switch, once the switch loses the power, all of this will be gone, because all the commands that you are typing in, if you see, all the commands that you are typing in are stored in the RAM itself. RAM is volatile, and once it loses power, it loses all its contents. So to save these messages, so that once the switch loses its power and when we restart the switch, the same commands or the same configuration should be active, we have to save the running configuration into the startup configuration. This startup configuration will be stored in something called as Nvram, which is a flash memory inside your Cisco device which stores the contents. Nvram stands for non-volatile random access memory. It is non-volatile. The name itself suggests it is non-volatile. So whatever you save it in the startup config, even though the switch is powered off, once you power on the switch or restart the switch, all the configuration will be saved there. So when I type in all the commands in the running configuration, I have to type something called as, if you check it out here, I'll show it here. See, copy running config to startup config. I have to type in this command. This is once again very much similar to the Linux commands that you use. So I am saying that copy running configuration into startup configuration. What this command does is, all the things that you have been typing until now, you're entering your passwords and everything, or whatever restrictions you are placing on the switch, all these will be stored into the startup config. What is the purpose of storing it into the startup config? Then in that case, even the switch, you switch off the switch or you cut power to the switch, once you restart it, whatever commands you typed are already there and your switch will reboot from the same configuration. So this is the thing, and so this must be a good practice for all of you. Once you type in all the commands, the last command you always should type is copy running configuration to startup configuration. These commands where the tab help character will come into play along. I'll show you in the demo part, which makes it very easy. You simply write COPYR and then press tab. Automatically it will fill up the entire command. Similarly with the service password encryption also, you type in service P and press tab. It will autofill the entire command. So this is regarding your saving of the configurations. Sometimes if you did a mistake and you want to start completely fresh, sir, I'm not happy with what I typed, or I want to change the entire configurations, you can do that also. And this comes under the alter the running configurations. You simply need to write erase startup config. If you see here, this is written over here, erase startup config. That will remove whatever startup configuration is there and it will get back to the default configurations. So from that point onwards, you simply press in reload. It will start reloading the original iOS, whatever it is, whatever has come with the device, and you can start working with your own configurations again. This way you can starting from enable, configure terminal, enter into the global configuration mode, setting up the passwords. You can start from scratch. So these are the two options that you have. If you want to remove the running configuration that you have saved into the startup configuration, what you have to do is you have to type in erase startup config, which will remove the entire Nvram file system, and you have to press in reload. From that point onwards, it will start from scratch. Okay, and the next topic of our module 2 is something called as ports and addresses, which these terms we must have come across a lot many number of times. So what are ports and what are addresses? For what they did was they gave a small summary about IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. Most of you guys must have known. IP address is mandatory for any device to be identified on the network. If your system wants to access the internet, not within your network, if it wants to access the internet, it must be given an IP address. Unless until there is an IP address for a device, it won't be able to access the internet. That is a notation. Please keep these things in mind. So usually we used to have IPv4 addresses, but because of the address depletion, huge increase in the number of devices that are being connected to internet daily, IPv4 addresses are no longer sufficient. They are unable to provide address access. So we went for a new version of IP called as IPv6, which we got trillions and undecillion number of addresses. I'll tell you, we will discuss more about IPv4 and IPv6 in module 7. Okay, where we will get the first-hand experience of working with these addresses and also doing subnetting on these addresses also. For now, whenever you want to type in an IP address, this is the command prompt that you see. It will ask for an IP address and it will ask for a subnet mask and it will also ask for a default gateway. This is the common thing in almost all your laptops, your desktops, anywhere, any system you see. You get into the properties and you type in and you click on the IPv4, you get this particular command prompt where it will ask you to enter the IP address. Guys, your IP address is 32 bits in size. Your IP address is 32 bits in size and it is written in a decimal notation. We simply call it as a dotted decimal notation. That means those 32 bits are divided into 4 8-bit octets. That means this is 8 bits, this is 8 bits, this is 8 bits, and this is 8 bits. There are 4 octets. Each 8 bits is called as an octet. These 4 octets together form your 32-bit address. Your IPv4 is 32 bits in length, and this is the notation that we use because we humans find it much more easier to write them in decimals. That is the reason we don't use the binary notations here. Usually IP address only works in binary. So these things, we convert the binary into decimal and we type directly the decimal part here. And the subnet mask is actually going to tell you which network does this particular what is the network portion in this IP address. To understand more about the subnet mask, what do you mean by the network portion, we have to wait until the module 6, module 7, module 8, where we will have a deep discussion about the subnetting part. What do you mean by subnet? How do you identify the network portion? Why are we talking about a network portion? Why are we talking about a host portion? For now, please remember that without a subnet mask here, this IPv4 address will not be valid. Only when the IPv4 address is assigned along with the subnet mask only, it is a valid thing. Otherwise, it's not valid. This default gateway comes into play when your system wants to talk to somebody outside your network. Unless until there is a default gateway setup, your system will not be able to access outside your local area network. If your system wants to talk to an internet or talk to any system outside your network area, you have to set up the default gateway. This is also will be given through your ISP only. Don't worry about it. So this default gateway has to be set up whenever your system wants to talk to any other system outside your network. This also we will be doing much more during your later modules. We will be working on the default gateways also. Check it out. So IP address is 32 bits in length, and also the subnet mask is 32 bits in length. Both are the same size, and these are denoted in a dotted decimal notation where we divide the entire IPv4 address into 4 octets. Each octet is 8 bits in length. Okay. And your subnet mask will actually tell you what the network portion is and what the host portion is. And the default gateway IP or the default gateway address is the address of the router interface to which you are connected to. As I said, it might be a little bit confusing if I start explaining about it now. We will do it in the later parts. And moving on from IPv6 to IPv4 to IPv6, IPv6 addresses are 128 bits in length. And because it becomes really difficult to write 128 bits, we actually denote them in hexadecimal notations. I have brought an example here for you. If you check it out, this is how an IPv6 address looks like. Actually, there are a couple of tricks or a couple of things where you can use shortcuts to denote IPv6 addresses. We will discuss it in the later stages. And rather than dots, we use a colon here. If you see, each one of these things is 4 bits because each one of them is hexadecimal. 4 4 4 4. So 16. There are 8 parts in total. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. So 8 parts, each part is 16 bits. Together you will get 128 bits in your IPv6 address. The reason why we went for an 128-bit IPv6 address is because for the next coming 10,000 years, we will not be bothered with lack of IP addresses. For the next coming 10,000 years, also we will be least bothered. And as I said, these IPv6 addresses are not case sensitive and can be written in either lowercase or uppercase. If you see, the assignment of IP addresses is very much similar. In IPv4, you have to write down the IPv4 address followed by the subnet mask. In IPv6, you write the IPv6 address, but here you only mention the length of the subnet mask rather than writing the subnet mask. This is far more easier. Once you start working with IPv6, it is very, very easy. And the default gateway is also given in IPv6. Okay. This is how you do it. There are actually 2 ways of assigning. If you check, which is on the next slide, I will show you that. Let me go there. How do you configure the IP addressing? This slide is going to tell you what an IPv4 address is, what is the length of IPv4 address, what is the length of an IPv6 address, how to configure, how to assign them. So this is how you assign. You open it. If you see control panel, this is for manual configuration of an IPv4 address. Most of you guys must have known this. Control panel. If you don't know it, do it. Go to the network sharing center, go to the adapter settings, choose the adapter, and if you just right click it, display the properties, you will see like this an IPv4 window which will open. In our packet tracer, we do have the capability of showing this particular IP address assignment to the end devices. I'll show that also. And if you see, just type in the IP address, just type in the subnet mask, just give in the default gateway, that is sufficient for you. Similarly, in the same manner, you do it for IPv6 also. Rather than clicking the IPv4, you go for IPv6. Now, if you see, there are 2 check buttons here, right? If there are 2 check buttons here, this is for manual IP address tag. If I want to assign my IP address, which I have decided, I use this. But most of the systems nowadays, if you buy a new mobile phone, go to your network home, you are least bothered about assigning an IP address. You don't do it. You simply connect to the Wi-Fi and you start using internet. But I told you, for any device to be able to connect to the internet and get data from it, it has to have an IP address. Who is giving that IP address to your system or to your mobile phone? That IP address is actually obtained automatically. You have something called as a protocol called as Dhcp. We will study Dhcp in CCNA to how to set up a Dhcp server, how to create a pool, how to assign the IP address of Dhcp, which is very interesting. So this Dhcp, dynamic host configuration protocol, you check it out here, this is one. So when you click this check button here, this automatically will tell the system to go to the Dhcp server, dynamic host configuration protocol, and get an IP address for itself. Rather than a human being manually entering the IP address here, automatically these 3 will be assigned by the Dhcp server, which is nothing but your router or your access point. Okay, this is the most common way of giving an IP address nowadays, because if you take a large organization, everybody has got a mobile phone or 2 mobile phones and a laptop and something else. So there are vast number of electronic devices that are happening, and in order to make the job easier for the network administrator, what we do is we will make all the access points as Dhcp enabled. So when you enable the Dhcp, whenever you simply click this button, all the IP addresses will automatically come to the system, whether it might be IPv4 or even IPv6 also. Both of them has got the capability. So IPv6, they do have another protocol called as SLAAC, Stateless Address Auto Configuration Protocol, which we'll discuss once again in that particular module of IPv6. So this protocol will allow us to assign the address even without Dhcp also. So no manual configuration is absolutely required. Okay, we come to the last slide of this chapter for me, which is the most important one. I have been continuously talking about the connectivity to a switch. I have been talking about that we can actually physically connect to a switch or even remotely connect to a switch. Now, in order to remotely connect to a switch, it has to have an IP address. Now, for me sitting at home, and if I want to access my switch from my home to do the configurations, unless until it has an IP address, I will not be able to do it through internet. So for me to assign an IP address to the switch, we call it as an SVI interface. Please remember this. SVI stands for Switch Virtual Interface. If you want to access the switch remotely through internet, you have to assign an IP address for the particular switch. And the default one is, if you see here, the default SVI for any switch is VLAN 1. Once again, we will study about the virtual LANs, setting up of virtual LANs, creating the VLANs, naming the VLANs, assigning the VLANs, all this in CCNA2. But in here, in this particular module, please remember that VLAN 1 stands for the standard virtual interface. Default SVI for any switch is VLAN 1. So if you get a question saying that configure SVI for the switch, simply type down interface VLAN 1. Because it's an interface, you have to type in interface here. It's not a line. So interface VLAN 1, and whatever IP address is there, you assign it. As I told you, when you are assigning an IP address, you always have to say the subnet mask. If your IP address does not have a subnet mask, your system will not be able to understand what address this is. It won't be unable to understand how to decode this IP address. Only when you provide the subnet mask, your system will be able to decode what the network portion is and what the host portion is. Remember that whenever you are assigning an IP address for an interface, this IP address must have a subnet mask attached to it. If you don't type this, it will actually, I told you about the help feature. If you don't type the subnet mask and press enter, it will tell you, sorry, command is wrong. Please check it out. Then you will be able to understand. Then you will be able to troubleshoot it by giving the appropriate subnet mask. Sir, how do I calculate the mask? How do I know what subnet mask to use? These things will be covered in subnetting. And finally, you have to say no shutdown. If you don't give this interface will be disabled. Guys, by default, the switch interface VLAN is disabled. That means it will be in the off state. Now for you, once you assign the IP address, and for the remote connection, it has to be on the on state. Unless until it is enabled, you won't be able to access. To enable the SVI, you have to type in this command. As I told you before, when you are discussing about the console port, line console 0, you given the password, and the third command is very important, login command. Unless until you give login, the password will not be used. Similarly, whenever you type in for the SVI, what you have to do is you have to enter the interface VLAN 1. In very rare cases, in your examinations, they will say for this particular switch, VLAN 10 is the SVI. In that case, whatever is given in the question paper, you have to write it down here. Interface VLAN 10 or VLAN 20, whatever they give. But by default, interface VLAN 1 you should write. If they ask you to configure SVI, simply write down interface VLAN 1, and whatever IP address is given, type the IP address here, apply the subnet mask, press enter. And if you don't do this no shutdown, it won't work. What you are doing by giving this command is you are changing the SVI state to up state. Up state means active state or enabled state. So this is regarding your SVI. And if anybody asks you a question regarding why SVI is needed, please remember one thing. For a device to be accessed through the network, it has to have an IP address. Similarly, in order to remotely access a switch also, it has to have an IP address. For that reason, we are assigning an IP address to the switch, which is nothing but your SVI interface. So if for us to assign the IP address, you enter these three commands. So this is regarding your SVI. Guys, I skipped something in between, which is nothing but whatever commands that you type in using your running config, you can actually save them to a text file also. It is very much easy once you use PuTTY. Use PuTTY, you can actually save to a text-based file. You can save that file, you can send it to somebody else, and you can download that particular text file, copy it to another flash in another system, and you can also boot the same system also. It gives you much more, how do I say it, easy, or it makes your job much more easier. Okay, you can actually save all the configuration to a text file and copy it and send it also. Now this ends our module 2. Please remember that we covered what do you mean by Cisco Ios, how CLI works, what is the command structure, how do you enter the commands, and also the most important thing that we covered here is what are the basic configuration steps. Please remember, the first step starts from assigning a host name. The second step is securing your user mode, securing your privileged mode, securing the remote access methods. Remote access means line VTY 0 to 15, and after that you give the banner message. Please don't forget the banner message, and after giving the banner message you have to save everything. And you have to encrypt the passwords also, and then save everything. Copy running config to startup config, press enter. And in case if you are asked to provide remote access to the switch, please remember interface VLAN 1, give the IP address, no shutdown. Remember these things. I know that I have taken a little bit extended time for this particular module, but as I told you, this module plays a very crucial role for your entire CCNA part. And in order to better understand these concepts, please check out the next packet tracer demo video that I am going to post, which will be posted. And for ease of usage purposes, I will be giving you the link to download the latest packet tracer version 7.3, 6.3 as a link in the comment section. So thank you very much. Good luck. Stay safe.